There was a time when her hand sought mine in her sleep. Now, the space between us in bed felt like an ocean. It wasn't a sudden thing, this distance. It crept in like a fog, slowly, imperceptibly at first, until one morning I woke up and realized I couldn't see the woman lying next to me anymore. We'd been married for 7 years. 7 years of waking up tangled together, of morning kisses, of a shared intimacy that felt as natural as breathing. Then, it just stopped. Her name is Sarah. Or rather, it was Sarah, the woman I married. She was vivacious, quick to laugh, and had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We built a good life. A comfortable home, a stable routine. We talked about kids, about growing old together. Our relationship felt like the bedrock of my existence, something I never had to question. That's why, when the first changes started, I brushed them off. It began subtly, with the kisses. They became perfunctory, a quick peck on the cheek as she rushed out the door for work, or a fleeting touch of her lips to mine that felt more like an obligation than affection. I told myself she was just busy. Her job as a marketing manager had picked up, demanding more of her time and energy. It was natural, I reasoned, that she'd be a little less outwardly affectionate when her mind was elsewhere. Then came the eye contact, or the lack thereof. During dinner, her gaze would drift. When I spoke to her, her eyes would dart around the room, settling anywhere but on mine. It felt like she was uncomfortable, or perhaps trying to avoid something. I'd try to catch her eye, to share a moment, but she'd just nod vaguely and change the subject. It started to feel like I was talking to a ghost, a presence that was physically there but emotionally absent. The worst part, the part that truly began to gnaw at me, was the flinching. My touch, something that had always been welcomed, cherished even, became something she actively recoiled from. I'd reach for her hand across the table, and she'd pull it back as if I'd burned her. I'd try to put my arm around her watching TV, and she'd subtly shift away, adjusting a cushion or reaching for her phone. In bed, if my leg brushed hers, she'd tense up, sometimes even let out a small, almost imperceptible gasp, and then roll to her side, facing away from me. Each time it happened, a little piece of me chipped away. The rejections were small but cumulative. They built a wall, brick by invisible brick, between us. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong. Had I become unattractive? Was I annoying? Did she just not love me anymore? I'd replay moments in my head, searching for a trigger, a specific argument, a mistake I'd made. But there was nothing. No big fight, no dramatic event. Just this slow, agonizing erosion of physical connection. I tried to talk to her about it. Once, I remember it vividly. We were sitting on the couch, after a quiet dinner. I tried to keep my voice gentle, non-accusatory. I said, "Hey, Sarah, I've been feeling a little disconnected lately. Is everything okay?" She stiffened, just slightly. Her eyes, as usual, avoided mine. She mumbled something about being tired, about work stress, about how I shouldn't read into things so much. She assured me everything was fine, but her tone was flat, almost rehearsed. It was a deflection, not a conversation. And I, wanting to believe her, wanting to salvage whatever was left, let it go. But the feeling persisted. The house felt empty even when we were both in it. Our conversations became superficial, revolving around logistics. Who was picking up groceries? What bill needed to be paid? The easy banter, the shared jokes, the comfortable silences, they were gone, replaced by an awkward quiet that hummed with unspoken tension. I missed her laugh, a genuine, unburdened laugh. It had become a rare sound, almost alien in our home. I'd catch myself staring at her sometimes, trying to decipher the unreadable expression on her face. She looked tired, yes, but there was something else there too. A preoccupation, a secret thought she was holding close. Her eyes, when they weren't avoiding mine, often seemed distant, like she was living in a world I wasn't invited to. It hurt, deeply. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage, a roommate she barely tolerated. One evening, I remember her being particularly distant. We'd eaten dinner in silence, and she'd immediately retreated to the living room, picking up her phone. I was clearing the table, and from the kitchen, I could hear the faint sounds of her thumb tapping away. Then, I heard it, a soft, breathy chuckle. Not the forced, polite laugh she sometimes offered me, but a genuine, spontaneous burst of amusement. It was followed by a few more taps, then another, longer, happier laugh. My heart sank. I walked into the living room, trying to appear nonchalant. She was hunched over her phone, her body language completely closed off. When she heard me, she visibly stiffened, quickly flipping the phone face down on the cushion beside her. Her smile vanished, replaced by that familiar flat expression. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice neutral. I nodded, but inside, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. That laughter, that quick hiding of the phone, it struck me as profoundly out of place. It became a pattern. The phone was always nearby, always face down, always muted. She carried it everywhere, to the bathroom, to the kitchen, even just moving from the living room to the bedroom. It was like an extension of her, a part of her she guarded fiercely. And sometimes, late at night, when I was drifting off to sleep, I'd hear the faint glow of the screen light up the darkness, and then, a few moments later, that quiet, private laughter. It was a laughter not meant for me, a joy she found elsewhere, hidden behind a screen, just out of my reach. The silence in our bed felt colder than ever. The silence did grow colder. It wasn't just the quiet in the bedroom anymore. It seeped into our whole apartment, settling into the spaces between us. Days would pass, and I'd realize we hadn't really had a conversation, not a real one anyway. It was all logistics. Did you feed the cat? Are you getting groceries? What time are you home? Each exchange was transactional, like we were roommates sharing a calendar, not a life. My attempts to break through were met with a wall I couldn't scale. I'd suggest dinner out, a movie night, even just a walk around the neighborhood, something we used to love doing. Sarah would usually respond with a tired sigh, or an excuse about work, or simply a vague promise for another time. Sometimes she'd just hum non-committally, her eyes already drifting back to the phone she held, face down, on her lap, or the table beside her. It felt like I was speaking into a void, and the void was starting to echo with my own desperation. The phone, her constant companion, became a symbol of everything that was wrong. It was always there. If she went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, it went with her. If she stepped into the bathroom, it was tucked into her robe pocket. She never left it unattended, not even for a minute. If I walked into a room where she was, she'd instinctively angle it away from me, or subtly cover the screen with her hand, as if shielding a secret from a child. It was a gesture so ingrained, so automatic, that it spoke louder than any words. I started to feel like a voyeur in my own home, watching her from the periphery. I'd catch her smiling to herself, a genuine soft smile that rarely, if ever, made its way to me anymore. She'd be engrossed in something on that screen, her thumb flying across it, and for a brief moment, her face would light up with an animation I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Then, if she sensed my presence, her expression would flatten instantly, replaced by a neutral, almost distant look. It was a Jekyll and Hyde transformation, played out in miniature, over and over again. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, that her marketing job was demanding, that everyone was glued to their phones these days. I searched for flaws in myself, trying to pinpoint what I might have done to cause this. Was I not engaging enough? Was I boring? Had I stopped being attractive? I looked in the mirror, searching for answers, but all I saw was a man growing increasingly confused and heartbroken. I'd try to initiate intimacy, a gentle touch, a kiss goodnight, and her reaction was almost always the same. That subtle flinch, the quick turning of her head, the unspoken withdrawal. The message was clear. "Don't touch me." And yet, the laughter, the smiles directed at the phone, suggested a warmth she reserved for someone or something else. One evening, I decided to push. We were on the couch watching some mindless TV show, or rather, I was watching it, and she was ostensibly watching it while her fingers danced beneath the blanket on her phone. I reached for her hand, gently, trying to intertwine our fingers like we used to. She tensed. I felt her muscles go rigid under my touch. She didn't pull away immediately, but her hand remained inert in mine, lifeless. After a beat, she pulled it free, almost imperceptibly, and then quickly reached under the blanket again. "Just checking a work email," she mumbled, not looking at me. The TV droned on, but the sound was drowned out by the thumping in my chest. Her work excuses started becoming more frequent and more vague. "I have a late call," or "I need to put in some extra hours on this campaign." She'd come home later, sometimes just an hour, sometimes two, claiming traffic or an unexpected meeting. But there was a new energy about her on those nights. A slight flush in her cheeks, a brightness in her eyes that contradicted the tired from work narrative. It wasn't exhaustion I saw, it was something else, a quiet buzz, an underlying excitement. Then she'd walk through the door, see me, and that light would dim, replaced by the familiar weariness. I found myself timing her bathroom breaks, or how long she spent in the other room talking on the phone. It was ridiculous, I knew. I felt like a detective in my own home, sifting through non-evidence. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. The gnawing suspicion was relentless. It felt like a low-frequency hum in my brain, always present, always demanding attention. One Saturday morning, I was making coffee. Sarah was still in bed, which was unusual, as she normally got up early to get a head start on emails. I heard the faint trill of her phone from the bedroom. It wasn't her usual notification sound. It was a more playful, almost musical tone I didn't recognize. A moment later, I heard her get up quickly. I heard the scuffle of her feet, then the soft click of the bathroom door. She'd gone in there, phone in hand, to answer something clearly not a work email. The door closed, and the muffled murmur of her voice began, hushed and low, interspersed with those soft, private laughs. I stood there, the coffee pot dripping, watching the steam curl into the air, my hands clenched around the countertop. My wife was in the bathroom, having a secret, animated conversation that brought her joy, a joy she denied me. And she was doing it in a room she knew would muffle the sound, where she thought I couldn't hear. It wasn't stress, it wasn't me. It was something else entirely. The realization hit me with a cold, sickening certainty. The excuses, the distance, the guarded phone, the flinching away from my touch, it all coalesced into a single terrifying truth that I still couldn't quite articulate. Later that week, she was getting ready for work. She left her phone charging on the kitchen counter while she went to shower. It was the first time I'd seen it truly unattended in months. I walked past it, slowly, trying to appear casual. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't stop myself. As I passed, the screen lit up briefly with an incoming message notification. Not a full message, just a name. It flashed for only a second before the screen went dark again. The name wasn't a contact I recognized, not from her work, not from our friends. It was just a single, unfamiliar first name, a man's name, a name that now burned itself into my memory. The name, burned into my memory, was Michael. It wasn't a work contact, not a friend, not anyone I'd ever heard her mention in our 7 years together. It hung in the air between us, unseen but suffocating, a ghost in our kitchen. My stomach twisted with a cold, sickening certainty, transforming the vague dread I'd felt for months into a sharp, pointed fear. This wasn't just about stress or distance anymore. This was about a hidden life, a secret world she inhabited, and a name that was clearly a key to it. I went through the motions of breakfast, forcing down coffee, my hands shaking slightly. Sarah came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, humming a little tune. She seemed lighter, happier than I'd seen her in ages. My eyes involuntarily flickered to the phone still charging on the counter. She picked it up, saw the missed notification, and a faint, private smile touched her lips before she turned away, shielding the screen from my view, as always. The smile was for Michael, the coldness was for me. From that moment, my observation shifted from passive worry to an active, desperate search for answers. Every interaction became a test, every movement a clue. I watched her like a hawk, trying to be subtle, trying to maintain the facade of a normal husband. But inside, I was unraveling. Her phone became her shadow. It was always in her hand, always face down, always muted. If she left the room, even for a moment, the phone went with her. Her attention to it was absolute, almost devotional. She started coming home later more frequently, always with the same vague explanations. Client meeting ran over. Team brainstorming session. Had to finish up a presentation. She never offered details, and I stopped asking because her responses were always curt, laced with an irritation that suggested I was questioning her dedication to work. But I noticed something else. On these late nights, she often came back looking vibrant, her hair perfectly in place, a faint, unfamiliar scent of expensive perfume clinging to her clothes. Certainly not the scent of a stuffy office. She seemed energized, not tired. One evening, after she'd come home particularly late, she went straight to the shower. I was in the living room, supposedly watching TV, but my ears were straining. I heard the water running, then the distinct sound of her phone vibrating from her purse, which she'd left on the entryway table. My heart pounded. This was it. This was my chance. I hesitated, battling with myself. This was a line I hadn't crossed. But the curiosity, the desperate need to know, overwhelmed my hesitation. I walked to the table, my movements slow and deliberate, as if I was afraid someone was watching. I reached into her purse. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of her phone. Before I could even pull it out, the vibration stopped. I froze, my hand still inside. The shower water still ran. I carefully pulled my hand back, feeling a wave of shame and self-loathing wash over me. I couldn't do it. Not like this. Not by directly invading her privacy, yet the missed opportunity felt like a physical pain. The next morning, I tried a different approach. I casually asked about her team brainstorming session from the night before, attempting to fish for details. "Oh, how was the meeting last night? Any breakthroughs?" I asked, trying to sound genuinely interested. She paused, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Her eyes darted away, to the window, then back to me. "Oh, it was fine." "Productive," she said, her voice flat. "Just a lot of back-end stuff. Nothing exciting." Her vague answer, her refusal to elaborate, confirmed my suspicion. The details didn't matter. The evasion did. The flinches, the emotional distance, they had always created a chasm. Now, the space between us was filled with unspoken lies and hidden conversations. I felt like I was living with a stranger, a perfectly convincing replica of my wife, but one who was fundamentally different. I started noticing small details in her appearance. New earrings I hadn't seen before, a subtle change in her makeup, a certain glow that wasn't for me. It was like she was trying harder, but not for our life together. My sleep became fractured. I'd lie awake next to her, listening to her breathing, wondering what she was dreaming about. Or more accurately, who. Sometimes, late at night, I would hear the faint, barely perceptible click of her phone screen turning on. I'd pretend to be asleep, my eyes squeezed shut, listening to the soft glow of the screen illuminate the other side of the bed, knowing she was connecting with someone else. Somewhere else. The thought was a physical ache in my chest. One Saturday, Sarah said she was going into the office for a few hours to catch up on paperwork. She often did this. I suggested I join her, maybe grab lunch in the city afterwards. "Oh no, it's really just going to be me there," she said quickly, a hint of panic in her voice. It's a quiet day. I just need to focus. You know how it is." I nodded, feigning understanding, but as she left I felt an overpowering urge to follow her. It was a terrible, desperate idea, but I couldn't stop myself. I waited 5 minutes after she pulled out of the driveway, then got into my own car. I kept a safe distance, watching her car's taillights. She didn't take her usual route to the office. She drove to a different part of the city, an area with trendy cafes and boutique shops, not office buildings. My heart sank further with every turn she made away from her stated destination. She parked on a side street, several blocks from where her car usually sat, if she was truly going into her building. I parked down the street, out of sight. I watched her get out. She pulled down the visor, checked her makeup in the mirror, and then grabbed her phone. She stood there for a moment, her thumb flying across the screen, a small smile playing on her lips. Then she looked up, her gaze scanning the street, a look of anticipation on her face. A moment later, a man approached her. He was tall, well-dressed, with dark hair. He wasn't someone I recognized from her work events or any of our social circles. He reached for her, not in a formal handshake, but with a familiar warmth, placing a hand on her lower back as he leaned in to say something, making her laugh. It was the laugh I used to hear, the genuine, uninhibited laugh that had been absent from our home for months. They walked off together, their shoulders almost brushing, heading towards one of the cafes. I stayed in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. The cold certainty had solidified into a terrible, undeniable truth. I had seen enough. The man, the secret smile, the obvious familiarity, the lie about where she was going. It wasn't stress. It wasn't me. It was him, Michael. The name had a face now. And that face was sharing a laugh, a touch, and a stolen Saturday morning with my wife. The pain was physical, a crushing weight in my chest that stole my breath. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to smash something. Instead, I just sat there, watching them disappear into the crowd, feeling like a ghost in my own life. I drove home in a daze, the pain a cold, hard knot in my stomach. My hands still trembled on the wheel. Every turn felt automatic, my mind replaying the scene in the coffee shop, their smiles, the way she leaned into him. The image burned behind my eyes. I had known, or at least suspected, but seeing it was a different kind of wound. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a fact, concrete and devastating. I pulled into the driveway, the house dark and silent. It looked the same, but it felt entirely different now, tainted by a secret I had just discovered. I walked inside, the silence amplifying the thumping in my chest. What was I supposed to do? Pretend I hadn't seen her? Wait for her to tell me? No, that wasn't an option. The lies, the flinching, the guarded phone, it all clicked into place with a terrible clarity. There would be no more guessing, no more self-doubt. I paced the living room, trying to calm my breathing. The anger was there, a dull ache beneath the shock, but mostly it was a profound sadness. 7 years. A life we had built. Reduced to this. I knew I needed to confront her, not with rage, but with the quiet weight of what I knew. There was no point in yelling. The damage was already done. All that was left was the truth, however ugly. Hours later I heard her car pull into the driveway. It was after midnight. The familiar sound, once a comfort, now sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I didn't move from the couch, where I had been sitting in the dark, waiting. The front door opened and closed. I heard her keys drop on the hall table, the soft click of her heels. She walked into the living room, pausing when she saw me in the dim light. "Oh," she said, her voice a little breathless, surprised. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice sounding flat, even to my own ears. "I've been waiting for you." She shifted uncomfortably, her hand going to her hair. I noticed the faint scent of that unfamiliar perfume again, trying to mask something else. Her eyes darted away from mine, a familiar evasion. The usual excuses were already forming on her lips, I could see it. "Long day at work?" I asked, my voice betraying no emotion. She paused, then nodded quickly. "Yeah, really long. Had to wrap up that presentation for Monday. You know how it is." She started moving towards the stairs, clearly wanting to escape the conversation. "No, I don't think I do, Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet, "because you weren't at work today." She froze, one foot on the first stair. Her back was to me. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I watched her shoulders tense. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tight, a hint of accusation in it, as if Tux was the one who had done something wrong. "I mean, you weren't at the office for that presentation," I clarified, my gaze fixed on her. "You were at the coffee shop on Elm Street, with Michael." Her body went rigid. Slowly she turned to face me. Her face was pale, all color drained from it. Her eyes, usually so quick to deflect, were wide with a mix of shock and fear. The mask she had worn for months, the one of weary indifference and stress, crumbled in an instant. "What?" she whispered, a desperate, almost pathetic attempt at denial. "I saw you, Sarah," I continued, my voice still quiet but firm. "I saw you laughing. I saw you touching his arm. I saw you walk away with him, so comfortable, so happy." The word felt like a physical blow as I said it, contrasting so sharply with the person she had become with me. While I was at home, wondering what I had done wrong, trying to figure out how to get my wife back. She couldn't hold my gaze. Her eyes darted around the room, settling on the floor, on the wall, anywhere but me. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. The fight had gone out of her. I can explain," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "Can you?" I asked, a hint of weariness finally creeping into my tone. "Can you explain the flinching, the phone always guarded, the late nights that suddenly energized you, the silence in our bed, the way you haven't looked at me, really looked at me, in months?" I let the questions hang in the air, each one a nail in the coffin of our marriage. She sank onto the bottom step, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders began to shake. I watched her, feeling nothing but a hollow ache. The tears came, silent at first, then racking sobs that filled the quiet house. It wasn't the dramatic confession I had expected, no grand declaration of love for another, just the sound of a woman finally breaking under the weight of her own deception. After a long moment she lifted her head, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. "I'm sorry," she choked out, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what, Sarah?" I asked, my voice still steady, even though my insides felt like they were tearing apart. "Sorry you got caught, or sorry you did it?" She shook her head, unable to meet my eyes again. "Sorry for all of it, for hurting you, for letting it happen." "Letting it happen?" I repeated, a bitter taste in my mouth. "That's how you describe it? Not a choice? Not a decision?" She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I felt so alone. You were always so busy. I felt like you didn't see me anymore." "And Michael?" "He just listened. He made me feel wanted." Her voice trailed off, a pathetic attempt at justification that only twisted the knife deeper. I scoffed, a quiet, humorless sound. "Wanted? You felt unwanted?" "Sarah, I begged you to talk to me. I tried to touch you, to connect, and you flinched away like I was a stranger. You blamed stress. You pushed me away, physically and emotionally, and then you found someone else to make you feel wanted?" The irony was a punch to the gut. The very intimacy she sought elsewhere was the intimacy she had systematically destroyed between us. "I know," she whispered, her voice full of self-loathing. "I messed up, I know." "How long?" I asked, cutting through her remorse. She hesitated, then mumbled, "A few months. Since things started getting really bad here." So, since the flinching started, I finished for her, the pieces finally slotting into place. The moment she decided I wasn't enough, wasn't good enough, wasn't home anymore. The moment she started looking elsewhere. The conversation that followed was not a passionate argument, but a series of quiet, painful revelations. There were no more grand pronouncements of love or promises to fix things. The trust was shattered, beyond repair. The "don't touch me" had been far more than just stress. It had been the withdrawal of affection, the physical manifestation of her emotional departure from our marriage. I told her I needed her to leave. Not tonight, not immediately, but soon. The house, the life we had built. It was all a lie now. I couldn't stay here, not knowing what I knew. Not knowing that every time she flinched, every time she laughed at her phone in secret, she was building a life with someone else, piece by piece. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, tears still streaming down her face. There was a strange relief in the air, a terrible, agonizing peace. The uncertainty was gone. The constant questioning, the self-doubt, the crushing loneliness. It had been replaced by a stark, undeniable truth. I watched her walk upstairs, not to our shared bed but to the guest room. The silence that settled over the house this time was different. It wasn't the suffocating silence of unspoken refusal, but the empty silence of an ending. The man, the secret smile, the flinch that broke us. It had all led to this. I was no longer a stranger in my own home. I was simply alone in it, and for the first time in months, I knew exactly why.